All right, we are live. Thanks everyone for joining us for I guess this is the 7th installment of the Virtual Throws Conference, a series we've been doing, just kind of keeping us involved with the throws. And this weekend, or this Tuesday, it's not the weekend anymore, we got Coach Garcia joining us, who is a high school throws coach and strength conditioning coach in California. Very well respected and renowned among high school coaches across the country. He was the high school strength coach of the year in 2019. He has coached 60 CIF finalists, and sorry, Nick, these numbers are outdated. 5 CIF champions in California and 10 plus state qualifiers. He also is one of the hosts of the Hammer Media podcast, and is going to be presenting to us today on some Bondarchuk principles and how he uses them with his throwers. But before I turn it over to him, quick thank you to MF and thank you to the National Throws Coaches Association. If you guys are wondering in the future how to access and figure out when we're doing these, follow the National Throws Coaches Association on Twitter. We're posting that stuff there. Keep you in the loop. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nick, and he's going to share a little bit with us, and we'll get rolling.
All right, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here, privileged to be here. And I'm going to share my screen right now so we can start with the presentation. If you have any questions, will they send them to you to go ahead and you'll fire them off at me at the end and I'll answer them?
You bet.
All right. All right, guys, here we go. All right, so the objective here is to apply Dr. B's system in a high school setting. I started doing it a number of years ago with a guinea pig, and this guinea pig that I used, his name was Kyle Swanson, and he was a 34-foot shot putter and as a freshman year with a 10-pound shot. So I figured he was a perfect guy to use it with and apply it to, since no one really had at the high school level. And it wouldn't necessarily cost us any points or whatnot because he wasn't at that level yet. The following year, when we started applying it, his sophomore year, he improved 12 feet to 46 plus and with a 10-pound shot. And then when we really got him dialed in, his junior year, he threw 4 feet, and then his senior year, he threw 57 feet and change, and was one of the best throwers in Southern California. So he went to a relatively below-average shot putter as a freshman to I guess you could say, an elite or top shot putter when he was a senior. So this program is extremely effective, and we'll go over the odd ins and outs of it in this presentation. All right, so those of you who don't know who Dr. B is, okay, he's a 1972 Olympic champion and a 76 bronze medalist. Okay, Soviet national coach 76 to 92. He's coached over a dozen Olympic medalists, including Yuri Sadiq, the world record holder in the hammer throw, a 2-time Olympic champion, Dylan Armstrong, Olympic bronze medalist, 22-meter shot putter. And Dylan was actually originally a hammer thrower. He transformed into a shot putter. Obviously, the Soviet dominance in the hammer throw was unmatched for the past 15 Olympics. Okay, and because of it, Bondarchuk is a huge reason, if not the reason, for their success. Okay, so a big thing is the transfer of training. What transfers best to our skills in the ring, regardless of what event you're doing? Positive transfer, okay? Increase in one exercise positively affects another. The results rise in parallel. So, for example, you increase your power clean, your shot putting increases as well. Neutral transfer, changes in one exercise does not affect the other. For example, we all know that the bench press doesn't necessarily affect hammer throw distance. So that would be, neutral transfer. All right, it doesn't matter how much you bench and whatnot. Negative transfer, increase in one exercise negatively affects the other. Power events like the shot put, hammer throw are events. Yeah, those are power events. Marathon is obviously a slow twitch event. So you train the marathon, probably going to lose some weight, turn your fibers into more slow twitch fibers, and it's going to have a negative effect if you're improving your marathon time on the shot put. Okay, in this system, there's weight training and strength training. On the left-hand side, squat, that's the weight training. Strength training for us shot putters, okay, takes place in the ring with multiple weighted implements. Overweight, underweight, and the actual competition implement. This athlete right here, Jordan Palmer, was a 58-foot shot putter for me. You see him on the left. He's squatting over 500 pounds. And he was using this system before we tested. So people sometimes argue, as we'll get into as far as the presentation goes, how, well, you don't train heavy. You need to train heavy to lift big weights, throw far. Well, he never trained heavy his senior year, and before he left for college, we tested him, and his strength was pretty much through the roof, especially for a high school kid. Oops. Okay, so let's go. The objective of this system is to determine the amount of training sessions it takes for each individual athlete to reach peak form and determine what exercises produce the most transfer in the throwing event. Okay, if you have a look at traditional periodization, what we do is we plan backwards from the main meet that we want to perform well at, or the meets we want to perform well at. And some of us, that's indoor and outdoor. Some of it could be, outdoor conference, and then we have to kind of hold for NCAA regionals or our high school regionals and whatnot. So you got to hold that peak for a long period of time. And in the traditional way, it can be done, but it's extremely challenging. In the Dr. Bondarchuk system, what we do is we run something called a developmental cycle, and we let that developmental cycle run extra long to be sure that the athlete hits peak form. And as we get on in this presentation, you'll understand more and more what I'm talking about. But we allow the athlete to hit peak form when their body wants to hit peak form. And throughout the developmental cycles that we assign them, they'll develop a pattern. And once we have that pattern or understand that pattern, then we can start planning backwards for the important meets, and we're able to hold that peak when they do hit that peak form. Okay, in his system, there are exercise classifications. There's the competitive exercise, specific development exercises, specific preparatory exercises, and general preparatory exercises. All right, so I have all his books, read most of his books. Okay, I learned straight from the system, people who run the system, Dr. B and Derek Evely himself, as well as Martin Bignieser. So I was able to decipher that information in the books a lot better than most do. Because of the way they're written. They're fairly scientific, fairly complicated. But this is kind of a layman's terms of how to run the system. And it's far more simpler than people believe it to be. What's a competitive exercise? Okay, in training, that's throwing underweight implements, overweight implements, and the competition implement. Your throwing that takes place during training is a competitive exercise. Okay, there's many ways to sequence this. Okay, we could go all overweight, all underweight, or a combination of both. Okay, whatever is chosen, it is important that during developmental and maintenance cycles, which we'll get into in a bit, the competition implement is always used. So regardless if we choose to do all underweight, we still need to have the competition implement involved in training. So in this case, for high school level, it would be the 5.45K or the 4K for the female. If for us college guys and international guys, it's the 16-pound and obviously 4K as well for the females. Now, what I like to do is I start off with all overweights to start with. So the first developmental cycle, we're going to throw probably a 14, a 6K, and the 12 or the 5.45K competition elements for training. Okay, then we'll move to all underweight. My objective here is to see what the athlete reacts best to, what transfers best for that particular athlete, because it's always going to be different. I've had two guys throw 56 plus in the past on the same team, get one at the last developmental cycle before the big meet. They were all overweight, and the other kid was all underweight because that's what transferred best for them. And this is the beauty about this type of program is you tailor it to the athlete. So that's important for their utmost success. Specific development exercise. Okay, these are movements that mimic the throwing movement, but something other than the actual input is being used as resistance. You can be creative here. Okay. Once an athlete has big general strength numbers, this movement can become the movement that produces the most transfer. I've been personally fortunate to train with a number of let's say, world champions, Olympic medalists. One of the most recent world champions their philosophy was not to throw multiple weight implements. Most of the time, they did all their work with a 16-pound shot. And sometimes at the beginning of the season, they do some wheels or some 180s with a 18-pound shot. But very seldom in the full throw do they ever use any different weight implements. He kind of changed the philosophy a bit as in recent years, and he started throwing multiple weight implements. And he had a huge result. He's had huge results. I'm not saying that's primarily because of it, but if you look at your strength numbers and you PR in the squat, you PR in the clean throughout the year, but your personal record does not go up in your event, then obviously the general strength is not the end-all be-all. The max strength is not the end-all be-all. You start throwing multiple weight implements, all of a sudden you PR or have a significant PR when you're already at a huge level. There's something to be said for that. So I want you guys to think about that. Okay, so here's an example of a specific development exercise. Okay, we call it the Nelson kettlebell throw. It's like a stand throw with a heavy kettlebell. Okay, the girl on the right, she was a 49-footer for me. Very explosive athlete, very good athlete. But we use this system with her as well. Okay, the next classification is specific preparatory exercise. Okay, movements that utilize the same muscles as a throwing movement but do not mimic the actual throw. So, for example, the clean, the squat, the jerk, etc. I split these up into two during our training sessions, which we'll see in a later slide. But so we'll have an explosive movement and a lower body movement is how I do it. Now, to give you a little background, when I started throwing again, I was about 34, 35. I began using this system so I could learn about it, understand it. And I was told you didn't need to do bench press. And, you know, in the American culture, you know, how much do you bench is a big deal. And so I bought into it. I had nothing to lose. And my objective was to go out and throw, 55 feet, 17 meters in a meet, make the finals all around here, so I get 3 extra throws. Well, the first meet I competed in after using the system, I threw well over 18 meters and continued to streak of over 60 feet a number of times. I hit a best at 34, 35 years old using the system, but not bench pressing in 2 years. I was just doing specific development exercises, and it worked extremely, extremely well for me. So, people say you have to bench. It's not necessarily the case. So bench press could be throwing with a specific preparatory exercise. I do it with my high school athletes because they like to do it. So we do it, and we do variations of it, but it isn't necessary. Here's an example, rack clean, okay, specific preparatory exercise.
Let's go, Riley.
Okay, finally, general preparatory exercise, okay? These are just general movements that may or may not have relation to the actual throw. What I like to do is I'm a big proponent of training on all 3 planes of movement, the sagittal, the transverse, and the frontal planes. So we create a circuit that, hits all those planes. So we start with a twisting movement. We go to a back movement, a frontal plane movement, and a sagittal plane movement, okay? So like an example would be a twisting movement. It could be a landmine, a long twist, an aquabag twist. Back movements, RDLs, good mornings, kettlebell big swings, skier swing. Frontal plane movement, kettlebell windmills, something we do called side ups, side bends, overhead bend, inside bends. In sagittal plane, there's a whole plethora of them. You have your ab wheels type stuff, you have your V-ups, your slams, sledgehammer type things. So the sky's the limit, but it's important to change it up every developmental cycle. Here are some examples. The top left is called a split jack long twist. If I can get it to play here.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, am I still there?
Yeah, you're back now. Your
I
screen
apologize.
That's okay.
It froze up. Sorry, guys. Let me get back to where we were. All right, the top left is a split jack long twist. The top right is a kettlebell windmill. Bottom left is a skier swing, and obviously the bottom right is a ab wheel. So they would do this circuit with no rest in between exercises. We prefer no rest between sets, but if they need to take a few minutes between sets, they're welcome to do so. One more time on the videos. All right, intensity and volume for training. Now, this is the big discrepancy or a big problem people have with it. Okay, we train at 60 and 70%. If you're going once a day, which we do at the high school level, we do 3 sets of 5 of each movement at 60 to 70% of their max, or just under speed, strength, velocities. What I mean by that is I'm kind of big into velocity-based training. So our characteristic we're looking for when training in this type of system is speed strength. Now, for example, doing a squat or a bench press at speed strength numbers is between 0.8 and 1.0 meters per second average or mean velocity. So what we'll do during this time is we'll have them test before we do that and find their speed just below 0.8. So what that means is I want their speed to be at 0.7 or 0.75. And the reason for this is because when they do hit peak form, they will go ahead and increase that speed, obviously, and may even move out of the characteristic we're looking for, may move above speed strength. So when we hit peak form, I want them to move into speed strength so we can keep working that characteristic rather than move past it when they hit peak form. So that's why we set the number just below speed strength numbers. Now, if you don't have a bar velocity device, you can get one. I work with Push. They really increase the reliability of their training devices and whatnot. So they've been working really good for me. If not, 60 to 70% will work fine. And you also know it when you see it. If something looks too light, then it's probably too light. If they're not moving it explosively, then it's probably too heavy. So you can kind of gauge in that fashion. If you're training twice a day, which some post-high school kids may do or post-collegiate guys may do, we want to do 2 times a day, 2 sets of 5 in the morning and 2 sets of 5 in the evening at the same numbers as above, 60 to 70%. All right, with about a 6-hour rest in between each session. Okay, we went through the exercise classifications. Let's look at the cycle classifications. Traditional systems have different names from you got your hypertrophy, you have your max strength, your max power, your peaking phase. People use different things. Well, in this cycle classifications, there's only 3. There's developmental, there's maintenance, rest, cleanse, or parts. Now, the reason why there's 3 names on that last one is because people refer to it as different things. But if you hear part cycle, if you hear cleanse cycle, if you hear rest cycle, you know that they're all the same. What is a developmental cycle? This is a cycle that the development of the throw takes place. It is during this cycle that peak performance is reached. So this is the time where you're taking data every day. And how we take data is we plan our implements. Okay, so if we're throwing all heavy implements, we're going to have the athlete plan take a certain specific number of throws with the 14-pound shot. Okay, if he takes 5 throws with a 14-pound shot, we're going to measure the best throw he took with that shot. We're going to mark it. And then with a 6K shot, we'll do the same thing. With a 12-pound shot, we'll do the same thing, and we'll enter it in an Excel spreadsheet or a number spreadsheet, and we will go ahead and track that and turn it into a line graph. And you'll see peaks and valleys. And after a while, you'll start to see a pattern. You'll see if they're good after a day off. You'll see if they're bad after a day off. You'll see how many sessions they start throwing well at or start dropping off in. This is key to this system for you to figure out how they react. All right? So, moving on here. Okay, in the developmental cycle, there are different types of programs. You'll hear coaches talk about program 1 or program 2. A 1-part program is usually just one event. So you're just a shot putter, just a discus thrower, just a hammer thrower, or even just a javelin thrower. Okay, a 2-part program is you do 2 events, or you may do 1 event and you have 2 different setups, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. Okay, so the one thing that is important to understand, the one-part program, you'll hit peak form faster than two-part. Basic knowledge is that the less things you have to adapt to, the faster you will adapt to it. So the one-part program, there's obviously less things you have to adapt to. A two-part program has two complete different sessions. Therefore, you have double the things to adapt to. Therefore, it takes longer. Now, it doesn't take twice as long, but it does take a little bit longer. Keep that in mind if you run this type of system. Okay, here's an example. Okay, a one-part program. You got your throwing. Okay, your SDE, your SPE number 1, your SPE number 2, and your GPE circuit, which we all described earlier in a slide. A two-part program, you have part 1, you may do it in the morning, and part 2 in the evening. You may do part 1 on day 1, part 2 on day 2. All right, so it's the same setup. However, you'll notice that we just have one SPE in the morning or in session 1, and one SPE in the evening or session 2 the next day. Okay, so for example, we would do SPE number 1 as an explosive movement on, let's say, Monday, and on Tuesday or an evening session, we would come back with SPE number 2, which would be our lower body movement, our squat, our step up, our lunge, whatever we choose for that cycle. Both the SDEs, okay, number 1, number 2, and both GPE circuits, okay, are different. They're going to be different. Same thing with the throwing. In the morning, you may throw all heavy implements. In the afternoon, you may throw all light implements. Or day 1, you may throw all heavy implements. Day 2, you may throw all light implements. That's the difference between a one-part and a two-part program. Training schedule. Okay, the 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 day on, 1 day off allows stability. Now, this is what we normally do at the high school level, and the reason for this is because we're not allowed to train on Sundays. Therefore, they go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, off Thursday, on Friday and Saturday, because we normally have meets on Saturdays, Wednesdays and Saturdays, so that's how we do it. It works perfect. And then Sunday they have off. Now, a 2 day on, 1 day off allows an extra day of rest every so many weeks as you move along in the system. You're also able to manipulate it a little more. You can manipulate the 3 on, 2 on as well, but the 2 on, 1 off, if, for example, your athlete hits peak form at 23 sessions, and you're looking at the meet and you're saying, oh man, well, it's going to be, 28 sessions before we get there. So you can start throwing in 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, 1 off to manipulate it, so you kind of take those 5 extra sessions out and you hit that peak form around 23 sessions or so. You can also go 6 days on, 1 day off. You obviously have quicker adaptations because you're doing more sessions, but some athletes can get overtrained or tired from doing this. The younger athletes don't seem to have a problem. The older athletes like me, if I tried to do 6 days on, 1 day off, I'd be hurt. Injuries or sickness. Okay, once you start a developmental cycle, you have a 10-day period that can be had if sick or injured and still keep the reaction the same. After this period, a rest cleanse cycle must be performed before beginning of the developmental cycle. So what does that mean? Okay, we all, like for example, my personal peak form happens between sessions 16 and 23. That's where I hit my peak form personally. Now, if I started training and did 5 sessions, and then I have a 10-day layoff because I was sick or injured, and start over again with the same system, I'm not going to hit peak form again at that same pattern of 16 to 23 roughly. Okay, I'll have to start a new one, do a cleanse cycle, which we'll get into in a second, and then start a new developmental cycle. But if I have a 6 or 8 day period where I'm off, I can still make that window where I'll just continue and still hit the same amount of sessions before I hit peak form. Hopefully that makes sense. But if you go longer than 10 days without training, then you got to start over again. Okay, our maintenance cycle. The objective here is to hold peak form. Okay, there's 2 ways that we've done it. We started off doing it the traditional way, which is switch exercise every 2 weeks. So you would look at your developmental cycle setup. Okay, and you would change everything completely. So you would change your competitive exercises, your specific development exercises, your specific preparatory exercises, and your general preparatory exercises every 2 weeks completely. Okay, and this does a really good job of holding your peak form within, let's say in the shot put, you hold within 30 centimeters. And you'll kind of see that on a graph that I'm going to present to you later in the presentation. Now there's something called tariffs. Okay, we switch a classification every 2 days. So normally I have a chalkboard up showing you guys what I meant. So I'm going to do my best job here to describe it over the computer here. So if you have your developmental cycle set up, and let's say we throw the 14, the 12, or the 6K and the 12 for our competitive exercises, we're cleaning, we're doing step-ups, and we have our GPE circuit, okay? The first thing we would do when we know we reach peak and we want to stay in our maintenance cycle and keep that peak form for as long as possible, we would switch the implements. So we come back, we're in peak form, okay, we're going to change from a 14, a 6K, and a 12 to a 12, a 5K, and a 10 pound. Okay. After 2 days of that, we're going to keep those implements, but then we're going to change the clean to a snatch. So now we have our competitive implements different. We have our Olympic movement different. Okay. And it's been a total of 4 days. So after 4 days of that, we're going to switch the next thing, which is our step up. We're going to switch that to a squat. So now we have almost complete half the developmental cycle that is different. Okay, we're still keeping the same GPE circuit. After 2 more days, we complete we change the whole GPE circuit, and now we keep that for 2 days, and now theoretically for 2 days we have a complete new circuit of all different movements. After 2 days of that GPE circuit, we're going to go back up to what we're snatching. We're going to change that to a jerk or a one-arm snatch or some other explosive movement. You just keep following that sequence every 2 days as you go, or every 2 sessions as you go, and it'll hold your peak form. Like I said, I'll show you that in a graph we have coming up here. Okay, length of cycle is dependent upon when you begin this cycle, can last weeks. Okay, Dylan Armstrong did this well, from what I understand from his coaching during the Diamond League competition. Athletes have to make money during this time and hold good performance for the World Championships. So that 1 year, he had a really good high performance level throughout the Diamond League and still did a really nice job at the World Championships. The reason why I say it's perfect for the NCAA system is because you got to be good at your conference meet, and even before your conference meet, your your head coach may want you to be really, really good at the dual meet. Often schools have dual meets, like for example UCLA, USC, Arizona, Arizona State, and they're usually right before the conference meet. So Cal, Stanford. So they want to be good for that meet as well. So you got to hold that level of performance through conference, through regionals, through NCAAs, and finally the USAs if you have that caliber of athlete. And this system works extremely well in doing so. For us in California, we have a number of different things we have to go through else we're eliminated. For example, we have our conference meet, and if you're not in the top 3 or don't hit a hard mark, you're out. Then the next week we have prelims, CIF prelims. And our state is so big that you can kind of look at that as kind of a state prelims for most states. You don't get through that. If you're not in the top 9 out of your whole division of that, you're out. Then we have CIF finals. Okay, that would be like the state championships. Finally, we have the Masters meet, and you have to be in the top 12 of all athletes in the whole entire southern section, which is, I think something like 600-700 schools.
Massive.
To move on to the Masters meet, right? And so if you're not in the top 12, you're done. And then after that, you got to be in the top 6 to move on to the state meet. And finally, you have to be in the top 12 to move on to the finals of the state meet, and so on. So we got to hold our peak for 6 to 7 meets. And in my experience, in the past number of years that I've used this system, we've been able to do so. And for the last number of years, we've hit peak form at our state meet almost every time. Okay, here are some examples. Okay, we'll use collegiate movements, for example. So you look at maintenance number 1, 16, 15, 14, shoulder punches and specific development exercises. And if you guys are interested in more specific development exercises for the shot put, type in Hammer Media, HMMR MEDIA, my name, and you'll see a number of different shot put ones on there. Snatch, step up, GPE circuit. Now, after 2 weeks of a traditional way of doing the maintenance cycle, all right, we switch everything. We're doing 18, 17, 16. We're doing a different SDE. We're cleaning instead of snatching, squatting instead of stepping up, and have a whole new circuit. That's a traditional example. Terrorist example, okay? Once again, same type of developmental cycle, 16, 15, 14, okay? Shoulder punches, snatch, step up. We hit peak form. We go into maintenance. We chain our implements to 18, 17, 16. Rest of the exercises we're doing in our developmental will stay the same. So shoulder punches will stay the same, snatch will stay the same, step up, etc. After 2 more days, okay, we switch to the specific development exercise to landmine. Rest of the exercises stay the same. After 4 days, okay, we switch the SPE, okay, to a clean instead of a snatch, and so on. So after 6 days, 6 to 8 days, we have almost a whole new, or we do have a whole new cycle. Rest and cleanse cycles. Now, what you'll find here is you'll find some adaptation here as well. You'll see where your athletes hit peak form here as well. So to give you an example, in my developmental cycles, I had a mini peak between sessions 3 and 5, and then I had my big peak at 16 to 23. When I started doing rest cleanse cycles, when I went to a rest phase, I would have my kind of a mini peak in the rest cycle at sessions 3 to 5 as well. But my other peak wouldn't come until the end of the rest cycle, which would usually be about 17, 18, 19. I wouldn't hit early 16 like I did in the developmental. But our goal here is to keep our muscles active and clean out all the movements that we did in the previous cycle to move into the next one. That's why it's called cleanse. It's rest too, because these movements that we're doing, we're only throwing a light implement. Like, for example, a high school thrower will throw a 10-pound shot or a 5K the entire cycle, and they're all body weight movements done in explosive form. Here's the structure. Usually 15 to 20 sessions, okay? 4 to 5 throws with light implement, followed by general strength circuit. An explosive movement usually is a jump or a med ball throw, a twisting movement with that light med ball, and we're talking like a 3K med ball, nothing heavy. Lower body movement with just body weight, a body weight lunge, a dynamic step up, a body weight squat. A back movement like a prone swimmer, more of a back stabilization movement, a prone swimmer, a prone cobra, Superman's. And then finally an ab movement like a V-up or a sit-up or a reverse crunch, something like that. All right, and then like I said, we would do a light implement. And here's where the parts word comes in that we talked about earlier. Parts is basically how many times we go through this. We normally want to go through this 3 to 4 times. I use 4. So it would take 4 to 5 throws, do the circuit, repeat 4 more times in the session. So they're taking roughly 16 to 20 throws and doing 4 circuits. Now, the importance of this, once you find where you adapt at and where you hit peak form at, let's say, for example, me again, 16 to 23, you know that it's going to be a constant for the most part. Now, if the next cycle you do not hit it between 16 and 23, it happens later or it happens earlier, or you don't necessarily hit a peak form, what that means is that your rest phase, your parts phase, your cleanse phase wasn't long enough. I personally started off with 3 parts, okay, 3 circuits in a session for 15 sessions. That wasn't enough. That was only 45. I increased it to 4 parts to 20 sessions, okay, and everything lined right back up for me. 16 to 23 every time. So 80 parts is what I would do. Now, you could argue that maybe I could drop to 4 parts for 15 sessions, but I found my groove and I found where I was best at, so I stuck with that. Okay, just here's an example of a high school style setup. 5 throws with a 5K shot, heat for height times 10, tight twist times 10, lateral lunge times 10, prone cobra times 10, and all straight cross current times 10 each side. This is 1 part. 4 sets of this equals 4 parts. Throwing data. Okay, bear with me. We're starting to finish up here. Like I talked about earlier, most important for success in the system. You got to take your throwing results for each day, and that's the best result in each implement. Now, one thing that I had a girl named Ganika Uchiku. She was a 49-foot shot putter for me. And she would throw extremely well in practice, which would skew the data because when we go to the meet, I guess you could call it, she would choke in the meet. Now, she was a good enough athlete where her chokes were still far throws, but it would skew the data between her in practice versus her in competition. So what we started to do, we obviously worked on her mental capability, attack that. But we also did a form of a competition during practice. So if I had her take 5 throws with a 10-pound shot, 5 throws with the 4K shot, and 5 throws with the 3K shot, I would designate 2 throws of each of those sets as the ones that were going to be measured. Therefore, each time I would call her name out, Ganika up. And she'd have to kind of simulate a competition environment because she knew she was on the spot there. And then everything started lining back up again and things weren't skewed. She became a better competitor, and it worked out for us. But that, if you have a problem with an athlete like that, which they're very common, that's kind of a way to do it. Put them on the spot in competition and help them work not only on their mental game, but help their results in practice not get skewed compared to the results of the meet. Lifting data. Okay, so like I said, I like to use bar velocity devices. This could be backup evidence when peak form is reached. And what I mean by that is if their speeds are up during lifting and their throws are down, that usually means that they have a technical problem in the throw. Okay, that means they had a bad technical day or something was off rhythmically. But if speeds are up and throws are up, you know that you're in peak form, and you know that it's go time, and it's just a secondary data or secondary backup to know when peak form is reached. Changing programs. When do we change? Okay, the data tells you when it's time to change. Okay, also the time of year. It determines what you change to, rest or cleanse or maintenance. Okay, let's take last year, for example, one of my throwers, Lions. Last year he threw 61.4, 61.2 is what he threw. And so we hit peak form at the conference meet, and now it was time. Well, we have a number of weeks before the state meet. We have roughly 5 weeks before the state meet. So can we get another developmental cycle in, or should we go into maintenance? Well, looking at the data that I had taken the whole year, there wasn't enough time to get into another developmental cycle in. So what I did was we went straight to maintenance. Now, if there was enough time, let's say he had peak form a few weeks before conference, then I'd say, okay, let's risk it. He's a good enough athlete to get through all these meets without hitting peak form until the state meet. Let's go ahead and hit another developmental cycle to get maximum development and get him the best opportunity to throw as far as possible. But in that case, that wasn't it. Another thing that the data tells you is, I'll use myself as an example once again, is I did really, really well on rest phases. And I knew that on rest phases, I'd throw really far, almost far, if not farther, than a developmental cycle. I'd still hit peak form in a developmental cycle, but throwing the lighter implements, I reacted well with. So what you'll see on a graph I'm about to show is you'll see at the very end, I was in maintenance, and then I knew that I'm going to go into rest here because I know I throw far off the rest. Most importantly, I threw far every time I used the 6K in my training. So there's an example of transfer. Whenever I threw the 6K far, I threw the 16 far. Okay. Like I talked about earlier, sessions can be eliminated or added within reason to reach peak form in specific areas of time if need be. Upwards of 4 to 6 pieces a year rather than just 1 or 2. Some guys just have 1 at their very end of their outdoor year if they don't have indoor. Some may have 2, indoor and outdoor. Okay, this one can allow you to have 4 to 6. This is an example of a training plan I give out to my athletes. Okay, this is what they get, and you'll see it's an Excel format, and on the bottom is where I keep the spreadsheet and the data, and the line graphs will pop up, which you'll see in a sec. So here's an example of a season, and this is how you tell that you have good growth. Okay, now you look at the clumps, like in the first purple area that I've highlighted, you'll see a lot of the clumps of the X's are lower than the clumps on the X's on the right. Okay, and then even more so on the right, all the way on the right side, you'll see the big clump of X's, okay, even higher as a majority than the ones in the middle. And that's how you tell you're doing the system right. Okay. Same thing with the 6K you'll see up here. The graph wasn't big enough for the very end here, but you'll see that I have a big group up here on the right-hand side of green marks, represents my 6K. Now, one thing you'll see is that at the very end here, this was a time where we weren't competing much because there's other things going on. So you'll see only 1 or 2 X's above that 18-meter line because competition wasn't going on as much during that time.
Coach, I'm not sure we see what you see right now. We just see the warm-up example of a training
really?
slide still.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There we go. Oh,
hold on a sec. How about now?
That's better. Much better.
You see that?
Yep.
Okay, so look, going back and looking at the purple line, you'll see the clumps raise as you go. And that's how you tell you're doing it right. Okay, and like I said, I tracked everything, every implement and whatnot. Okay, one thing that I did find, okay, is you'll see, if you look at the very bottom on the right hand side, you'll see a darker blue. That's me training with a 20-pound shot. What I found with the 20-pound shot, you'll see a mark at almost 1560 on that. Okay, I was throwing huge for a week with a 20-pound shot. And what I found was after a week, I was through the 16 when I was throwing the 20-pound shot really far. But after a week, I got in such a hole rhythmically that it really destroyed me. And it took a while to come back from that. So you'll find these things out. I found that I could throw as low as a 5K and be, as low as a 6K and be great. But if I threw a 5K and a 12, I was no good. I could throw as high as 18 from a full, but if I threw a 19 or 20 from a full, it would destroy my rhythm. So you find these types of things out when you run this type of system with your athlete. Therefore, you know what to do and what not to do. If the 20-pound shot or that 19-pound shot, it's useful, but I would do it at a time in December or August or in the fall time where I didn't have any competition, where I wouldn't put it on. All right. So finally, here's some data collection here of meets, and you'll see distinct patterns. So let's start out with the first one, okay? You'll see 1, 2, 3, and then a big peak at number 4, then a huge drop-off. Then you got 1, 2, 3, a big peak, then a huge drop-off. So those are my peaks, and those are the drop-offs of my developmental cycle when I need to go into cleanse. And then you'll see 1, 2, 3. Now, you'll see where I went into maintenance, where I stayed the same the whole time. And then that very end that you see there, that big peak at the end, after that maintenance, I knew, okay, I'm going to a Atascadero. I like to throw there. It's a nice place to throw. I get good steaks there, Santa Maria style barbecue. I'm fired up. Okay, I'm going to peak for that. I'm going to drop into my rest phase. Okay, and I hit big throws there. Okay, off my rest cycle. So you learn all this stuff with your athletes, and it's pretty darn cool to see the data come about as you do it. Now it takes some time to get the data, but this is only 1 year of data that I figured all this stuff out in, and my next year was even better. So, it's something to look into, and if you have questions, I'd be happy to, go through it with you. I've gone through with a number of different masters throwers, different even, Division I coaches. One thing that we did this year, I can't necessarily say who it was. One athlete was extremely, extremely high level, high school shot putter and thrower, and he didn't necessarily improve his first 2 years in college. And they had a real traditional way of doing things, and so I started developing his program for him, the Dr. B style, and now he became he's improved a great deal, threw far at the big meets, and he became a multiple-time All-American in his event by buying into this. It was hard for him to buy in first because he wasn't ever training heavy, but it worked out for him, and now he's got complete buy-in. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in the future. Here's my info, my email, my Instagram, my Twitter. I have a website, GarciaPerformance.com, if you're interested in having me write training plans for you. Martin Beamisher wanted me to let you know he did a nice book called Train Talk. And if you join his site, Hammer Media, which is a ton of information on, not just for throwers, but for strength and conditioning, for sprinters, for almost any sport. It's a plethora of information. If you join his site, I want to say it's about $99 for the year, but don't quote me on that. But he'll send you his free Training Talk book. In that Training Talk book, he has excerpts from Dan Paff, from Derek Ely, from, I believe, Franz Bosch, from Vern Gambetta. The list goes on and on. So check that out. If you're interested, he'll send you that free book. Just send me information that you went ahead and joined, and I'll get that information to him, or let him know that you heard me on here, and he'll take care of you. And then on Friday, I'm doing a virtual throws consortium. I want to say you'll get 25% off if you use my name, Garcia. Just type in Garcia. And they got great speakers on there. Derek Evely, PJ Vazell, some high-level talkers on there. So check that out. Like I said, you put my name in, Garcia, on the promo code, and you'll get 25% off that conference. So first off, it's my honor to speak to you. I appreciate you listening to me. And if you have any questions, fire them away at Coach, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. We definitely have some questions here. I'm going to start rifling them off for you. David Espinoza has got 2 questions for you. First, are the throws that you're collecting data from, are those all full throws?
No, that's a good question. No, sir. What I normally do is we'll start with some stand throws or some wheels. Now, some people ask why or how are you supposed to work on technique and form when you're doing this type of cycle? Because if you throw in a bunch of different things, it's more to adapt to. So I'll take my athlete, for example, Lyons. What we'll do is we'll look at his technique and we'll say, okay, this is what he needs to work on this cycle. And we may take 4 stand throws with a heavy shot. And then if he needs to work on the middle part, we'll do 180s or wheels, whatever people call them, half turns. We'll do 6 of those with another heavy shot. And then we'll move into full throws. And we'll do full throws. We'll measure everything, though. We'll measure the stand throws. We'll measure the half turns each time, so we have data for everything.
Very cool. And when you are this is another question from David. When you're trying to figure out when it's time to move from a developmental to a maintenance or to a rest phase, are you looking for a plateau in the data? Are you looking for a drop off in the data? Like, what's your trigger point?
Okay, the trigger point is for the first developmental cycle, you'll hit a peak. I'll use my athlete Ganika Uchiku as an example. Her first year doing this, she hit peak form at roughly 12 to 18. And I'm thinking, oh man, if she hits it fast, this is perfect. We'll hit lots of peaks. Well, the first developmental cycle, I didn't let go extra long. And so what we found after her junior year, she would always hit peak form between 12 and 18. But what we found after her first year doing it is in the summertime, I let that developmental cycle go extra long just to see. Well, she hit an even bigger peak from 23 to 28. And so now I knew she'd have a big drop-off after that first peak, so I thought she was done. So I let that go on extra, okay? She hit 23 to 28, and now we knew it was 23 to 28. Then she had a big drop-off. So the reason why I'm telling you this is the first developmental cycle, you want to go extra long. And if you have a drop-off after 16 or 18, let it keep going because it still might go higher. It still might get better. But once you hit another peak, let's say at 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 8, and then you have a workout with 4 more sessions that were the results were down. And I'm not talking like 30 centimeters down. I'm talking about 60 centimeters down or 2 to 3 feet down each workout, each session. Then it's time to change. That means you're going on your downward spiral. That's when it's time to change. And now that I knew for me or for my athletes that 23 to 28 was her number, after 28 sessions, we cut it right there. Or if I was concerned about maybe it dropping off too soon, let's say like the state meet was at number 28, what I would do is I would cut it off at 25 and go into maintenance at 25 and try to hold right there.
Gotcha.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. And Al Farashidian's asking, are there other elements of training you include with this throwing and lifting sessions? Are there plyos or movement-based activities? And if so, what kind of other stuff? Or are you sticking to just these elements?
Well, that's a common question. It's a good question. No, we throw and we lift, and that's it. Now, don't get me wrong. For an explosive movement, it doesn't have to be limited to clean. It doesn't have to be limited to snatch. We do some different types of box jumps with dumbbells for some to change it up. So we'll have an 18-inch box and we'll jump up onto a box with dumbbells. So that's your kind of your plyo movement. But if you kind of take a step back and look, every throw that we take is a plyometric movement, right? You jump, like at the finish, you're exploding every single time, getting your triple extension every single time. So one can argue after a certain amount of development, do plyometrics really make that much of a difference? Now, I do both. My traditional guys, we do plyometrics. I'm talking about that on Friday in the other conference I'm doing, how we program everything. But we throw, we do specific development exercise, and we lift. And this is why it works extremely well for single sport athletes that just do track. Multiple sport athletes it won't necessarily work as well for.
So you do a more traditional like style of training with like your football guys and your like gals that come out from soccer or whatever.
100%. And what I found in the past number of years is that I changed my seniors because they're just track athletes because they won't be doing spring football or anything. We switch in December or January, whenever we started, to the Dr. B system when they're seniors. It gives me enough time to figure out where their peak's at. What I found is that we've had much greater development their senior year when we do switch to Dr. B system versus staying with the traditional system. So I always switch. And part of the reason for that is the amount of volume involved. Before I another question I want to make clear is that you can train with a lot. If you look at the large amount of volume that we have in this system, because you're training 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, or 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, 5 days a week, the same movements every day, 3 sets. You're only training at 60% to 70%. Your nervous system doesn't get shot, right? So you can keep that form of throwing for a long period of time without it messing with your rhythm, without messing with soreness, things like that. If you have a traditional style system, like I said, which I also use, okay, if you come in and squat on Monday, heavy, Tuesday, and even worse on Wednesday, you're going to have trouble finding that rhythm to throw. You won't feel good again until Thursday or Friday. Then you're at a gamble. Sometimes that throws the confidence of the thrower off, saying, oh, maybe I'm not ready to throw far, things like that. That's another beauty of this system is you have a large amount of volume, you're getting your volume in, and you don't destroy the nervous system at the same time.
Nice. And do you start your freshmen off right with this system? And how do you, like, if somebody's learning the event right from scratch, how do you, build that into this type of system?
No, sir. So I've done it both ways, but for the most part, I have to teach them a proper technical model. And doing all the drills that we do in order to teach that technical model won't necessarily allow for me to go ahead and do the system efficiently like I want to do it because there's too many variables in there when we're doing all the different drills and things like that. So the first year we develop the technical model of what I want, and then once I'm confident with their technical model, then we move into this style of training their sophomore through senior year. I have a specific foundation phase that we go through, which is dumbbells and kettlebells when they're freshmen, followed by a strength endurance phase, followed by a teaching phase of the Olympic lifting, and then followed by that we get more traditional with it. But not until they have a good foundation do we move to this type of training of both technical models and lifting models.
Awesome. And then a couple more questions of if somebody wants to learn more about this Dr. B style of training, where should they look? What are some resources that they can kind of, continue to get our heads wrapped around some of this stuff and dive in a little deeper?
I've written a number of articles on Simply Faster. So just go to Simply Faster, do a search for my name or Dr. B's name. Number 2, Derek Evely put out a course on the Dr. Bondarchuk system. It's a large course, and he doesn't just have courses on that. He has courses on parenting the star athlete, things like that as well. Check that out. It has a bunch of information on there. And then obviously Hammer Media. There's a number of articles on there that I've written that Martin's written. He's interviewed Derek. Our podcast has, information and sessions just on the Dr. B system. So check that out as well. And they're all broken down by episode, and it'll tell you exactly what we're talking about. So those are 4 or 5 resources you can check out.
Sweet. And I guess we'll try and wrap it up relatively soon, but Just again, you mentioned you have Garcia Performance. What's involved in that? And if people, you said people can find you at GarciaPerformance.com. Is that the?
Yes, sir. So what we do is, furthermore, before I get to Garcia Performance on Hammer Media, we also have an exercise library of all the different movements that we do. And if there's not a movement on there, then let us know. We'll put it on there. But it's all broken down by, for example, lower body. I'll say lower body. I'll say unilateral, bilateral, or single leg, double leg. Broken down by explosive. Core is broken down by transverse, frontal, and abdominal, etc. Now, Garcia Performance, what I offer there is, if you want me to write a training program for you, I'll go ahead and do that and distribute it to you through an app. And if you want me to go over videos with you and things like that, I do that as well. Just the program itself, I write programs per month, so it's $75. If you want videos, it'll be $100.
Cool.
That's basically what it is.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Nick. Pleasure having you on. Hopefully we get to talk with you more again about some of this stuff soon. Shout out to MF and National Throws Coach Association. MF is still doing 15% off all Nike throw shoes for anyone watching this. Code VTC15. And we're going to take a quick break, but then we'll be back for a Q&A with Michelle Carter. So if you're out there, stay tuned. That's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you very much, Nick. And we hope to talk to you again soon here. And
all right, thanks for having me. I appreciate being on here. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, see you, Rob. Have fun playing golf.
Yeah.